Okay, thank you. Everyone, welcome to ACDC number 158. The agenda is here. It's issue 1548 in the PM repo. So, yeah, today we'll cover some Fusaka things and also open the Glamsterdam conversation. And yeah, let's go ahead and get into it. So, first up with Fusaka, we have Fusaka DevNet 0. Perry, would you be able to give an overview? Last time I looked, it looked a little hectic.
Yeah, I think Barnabas might have the latest on that one.
Okay, great. Barnabas, would you mind
Yeah.
updating us?
So we basically set up Fusaka DevNet 0 with Fulu being activated in epoch 256, and then every single BPO will be 256 epochs later. So that will give us 1 day to observe if the BPO is working as expected, if any clients are causing any issues. And we decided to go up, down, and so far everything seems okay. We had a few clients that are still missing blocks, and some clients that have issues peering up, but we are actively looking into these issues. But the concept of BPO seems to be working pretty okay.
Okay, that's good news. Cool. Anything else on DevNet 0?
We had a bit of misconception regarding removing the blob count in Flow.
Mhm.
So there was a clarification that had to be done, and we had to add an additional blob schedule for the Fulu fork, basically on the CI side. So this was just basically saying that, hey, in Fulu we're still going to be using 6 and 9. But yeah, as I mentioned, this only touched the CLs.
Okay, makes sense. And that's already live on DevNet 0.
Yeah, this was done before the first before even Fulu went live.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Okay. Then next up, we have on our schedule today to get to a final SFI set for Fusaka. And I wanted to go ahead and cover this now because it might inform DevNet 1 scope. So yeah, essentially the only question we have is EIP 7917. This was the one that gives us a proposer look ahead. And it fixes kind of an edge case in the protocol where the proposer look ahead is dependent on the shuffling that mixes in the balances, and these can change any epoch boundary. This is not great if you need to rely on this proposer look ahead. Use cases like pre-comps obviously come to mind for this type of thing. And yeah, right now it's CFI'd. And the question then is if we want to go ahead and SFI this, and if so, we could even think about scheduling onto a devnet. Generally, the framing has been get a stable devnet with these CFI'd things, SFI'd things before thinking about, moving to just shove more features in. But yeah, wanted to open the conversation now because I think we should finalize what we want to do here today. So yeah, maybe to kick us off then, I see Lynn is here. I don't know if any of the EIP authors want to make a case for this. I think something that would be super helpful is also hearing from the community here, which in this case would be users of pre-comps, any pre-comp providers, and yeah, trying to get a sense of the demand for this.
Yeah, I can give a quick perspective from my side. So I think like if you look at the big picture, like we have the rule-centric roadmap, right? And I think that was good. Like it makes sense to, as a construction, like you post data to L1, but execute in L2. I think right now there's a lot of people who feel something wrong about the current rollups. Like it doesn't feel like they're just scaling L1 or they're just like an execution extension of the L1. And I think this is one of the reasons why we have like so much pushback right now for like the L2s and like going back to like L1 scaling. And I think a core part of this is that of why it feels wrong is that I think one thing is a centralized sequencer, basically. Like just having a single server somewhere that's like sequencing your transactions, it doesn't feel like a natural extension of the L1. And yeah, like it seems to like hurt the credible neutrality of the whole thing. And so like basically base rollups enable, and I think base rollups are like the way to solve this. It enables a rollup-centric roadmap, but like without the centralized sequencer. It's the only construction that's working right now in mainnet, where you can actually remove the centralized sequencer. But like the issue there is that we have very high latency. Like we have to wait at least 12 seconds, or because base rollups, they can't post every slot, so sometimes like close to a minute if the demand is not high. So this is why we need pre-confirmations and to actually lower this time to actually have like a competitive based rollup. And so I think in the end, what I'm saying is that like Ethereum scaling is very important. Rollup is important for Ethereum scaling. And base rollups, I think, is important for rollups. And base pre-confirmation is important for base rollups. So in the end, I think base, and like for base pre-confirmation, the CIP will be like a very good. It's very much needed, like at least to do it in a non-hacky way.
Yeah. Do you have a sense of how hacky it would be? I think that's a question at least I have is like, I think so yeah, the CIP aims to like patch kind of a edge case in the protocol, and then to go ahead and trigger it, it's like, yeah, it's not straightforward. So I wonder if there's a sense of, yeah, I guess how important is it to fix this now?
Mhm. I think Jason has been looking a lot right now. He's in the call from Fabric
Okay. Yeah,
on
Jason.
these hacks. So yeah.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, guys. So yeah, at Fabric, we're working on two goals. Is one to like help existing rollups become based, and two is help new apps launch as based rollups. So one of those initiatives was working on these inbox contracts for rollups, and yeah, without this EIP, it's pretty hacky. So like there's nice. I don't want to discount the importance of having look-ahead stability, but for us, what really matters is allowing the look-ahead to be accessible from the beacon state. Without this, like the problem we're trying to solve is that we need rollups to be aware and respect the schedule of pre-confers. And to do this, they need a view of the look-ahead. So without this, there's kind of three proposals. One that Tycho is working on right now is optimistic look-aheads. You have to optimistically post your view of it and add these incentives or trust like fault proofs after the fact. Like you can always use EIP 4788 after the fact. Another proposal is to sacrifice real-time settlement and L1 composability and retroactively determine the canonical L2 head by figuring out who the proposer was. This is simpler, but a lot of the value prop of based rollups is real-time settlement and L1 composability, unlocking things. And like a third really hacky approach that might be the simplest on chain is just you have to import all of the logic to derive the look ahead into your rollup state transition function, which starts to feel kind of like the beam chain effort. So adding the look ahead to the beacon state just trivializes all these problems and makes it safer and cheaper to run these rollups.
Yeah, that makes sense. Mark, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I mean, I was just gonna say, I think a simple way of looking at the problem is like, these pre-conf protocols need to have the proposer on chain ideally ahead of time. And we know that there is an edge case where the proposer can change sort of last minute. And so, I mean, in terms of getting information on chain, you have a few options. You can do, I mean, ideally you have proofs. That's with the CIP, you can actually prove it. If you don't have that, you have cryptoeconomic systems. But in this case, since there's an edge case where, people can stake on a certain proposer, but then it can change last minute. I mean, I think you you end up with a really complex cryptoeconomic system because people said the proposal was going to be one thing and then it ended up being another. Even if that's a rare case, the fact that it's an edge case that could happen makes it like really hard to do that. And then you're left with, I guess, like he said, either implementing like large chunks of the beacon chain protocol on chain or just having trust. So I mean, it just doesn't seem like there's a lot of good options here if we don't just make it provable.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, so yeah, a number of voices from people working in the space that would use this feature. Does seem like there's some demand for it. I'd like to get a sense from core devs, like how much of a lift this is to go into Fusaka. So I think that's kind of the big constraint here is we have PeerDOS and Fusaka. I think we'd all like to ship that as soon as possible. The question then is like, is this the right time to include the EIP? If we, risk Fusaka timelines at all, I think that's not great. At least, yeah, we should very intentionally make this trade-off. So yeah, I'm curious if any client teams have had a chance to look at this or even have a sense of implementation lift.
I mean, people may already know this, but it's trivial in Lighthouse. I think so far what it comes down to is basically, do you already have a variant of the Fusaka beacon state? Because I know some clients may not, since as of yet, the Fusaka beacon state has not changed from Electra, so it's identical. And so some clients have just reused the Electra beacon state. So if you already have a Fusaka beacon state, it should be really fast. It really was quite easy in Lighthouse. If you don't, the question becomes how much work is it for you to add a Fusaka beacon state? Just for the devs that haven't looked into this, that appears to be the main question.
Yeah, Ansgar has a helpful comment here. Lighthouse and Lodestar said above in the chat that it's a pretty small lift, similar for Teku. NC has a point around testing, and yeah, I guess this is kind of the core thing, at least for me, is without this, we don't touch the beacon state in Fusaka, so we just don't have to think about it. If we do include this, then the beacon state does change, and so it just increases sort of the scope here. That being said, our bread and butter is testing state transition changes, so it's not anything super novel. Yeah. Okay. Otis, do you want to speak to this a bit more? Your comments here?
Oh, I was just saying that for Prism it's the same. It's just not as trivial as Lighthouse, that it's just a one-line change, but I've been told that we have this very well documented and it shouldn't be a change that would take weeks. I think this discussion, however, is kind of irrelevant on the technical side. There's no argument on the technical merit of this EIP, nor on the need of the EIP, nor on the difficulty of the EIP. The only question here is there are many easy changes that are not scheduled for Fusaka. The question here is this going to delay Fusaka testing? Is it going to delay the fork or not? If everyone agrees that there's no delay possible because of this, then I think there's no complaint. If there's a risk that this is going to delay Fusaka, we all have agreed that we won't delay Fusaka under no circumstances, and this was part of our choosing on the scoping, then I think that's the question that we need to ask.
Yeah, I agree. Salius, you've had your hand up for a minute.
Yeah, so to answer it or to comment on Porto's ideas, I think, I mean, any change actually should affect the delay or whatever. I mean, it's in any case extra work and in any case extra effort. So I think whatever we add, even if it's small thing, this almost 100% delays things because it's extra stuff. So this is one comment. Another comment, I was just thinking, theoretically, if we have a more predictable look ahead than we have now, there is a kind of theoretical, at least the way I think, there is a theoretical decrease in security in some sense. I mean, likely it's a very minor or neglect, but likely there is. So that's another point.
Yeah, thanks. There's some good discussion in the chat here. So yeah, I think I'll start here. This is a question by Pari. Are there any unknown unknowns that could come up? And yeah, given that it seems like implementation is straightforward, this is mainly a question of testing. There has been some testing already. I don't have the PR handy, but there is one to the Fusaka specs from Lin and co. With testing there. So, it's not that it's like, oh, we need to go write the test and maybe there's issues. We have tests, testing can be expanded. And again, this is pretty straightforward. All of the client teams here know how to pull down the spec test and run them. So yeah, are there any other things anyone sees that we should consider? Yeah, Mark.
Yeah, just an angle that I don't think has been mentioned is sort of like what our main priorities are as a protocol. And I think there's pretty widespread agreement that like scaling blobs is one of our main priorities, and that's basically why we don't want to delay Fusaka at all. Yeah, but I would argue that like pre-comps and based rollups are also one of our main priorities for layer 2 experience. And that's sort of why this EIP is being considered, even if there are other EIPs that are also trivial. I do think it's closer to our main priority as a protocol, I guess would be my
Yeah. I mean, one comment on the other EIPs thing, like we've gone through the process and this is the only other EIP currently. Like there are an infinite number of other EIPs we could be talking about, but this is the one on our plate today. So let's just focus on this one. But that all being said, no one has really voiced any opposition and people generally seem like it wouldn't be a huge lift. So yeah, I think we go ahead and SFI it unless anyone would like to dig into that more. There is the option of pulling it if we absolutely had to, say for Glamsterdam or some other fork. That also has a cost, but yeah, that seems to be where consensus is at right now. Yeah, I was reading Perry's comments here. I feel like we're taking this the other way. I don't know, Perry, do you want to argue for this, your proposal versus the other way?
Yeah, I think my proposal is just that first we need to have stuff on the testnet so that we are like sure that there aren't any problems, but also just reading Tim's message that SFI just basically means next devnet. So I guess there's a counter argument for what order we do stuff in.
What's the timeline, Barry, to have this for the next devnet?
The next one's on June 9th, and devnet 2, we don't have a date yet, but we would like to have it in June.
I think we can have this by June 9.
Ideally, 2 weeks after June 9, we could have devnet 2, and that would be basically what would go to Sepolia and mainnet.
Okay, so Does everyone feel comfortable with targeting devnet 1 for this, or should we target devnet 2? Yeah, POTUS.
I'm not sure about other teams, but for us, I suspect that June 9 or 2 weeks after is probably the same because many of us are going to be in Berlin.
Anyone else? Any client teams want to speak to the timing?
Does I guess relevant question, do any of the other existing clients besides Prism not already have a variant of the beacon state for Fusaka, even though it hasn't changed yet? Because I feel like those are the clients that would take longer. And like, I guess my intuition is if Prism is comfortable by June 9th and they have to do the extra work, that other clients would probably be able to do the same thing, but I guess that depends on the load of the client. But yeah.
Yeah, I think I would say just to keep velocity high, just as a general process, we would go ahead and aim for devnet 1, so we'd SFI today. This would be your chance to raise any concerns with that timeline. Yeah, okay. Like Barnabas is saying in the chat, no one seems to have any issues, so let's do it. We'll go ahead and SFI this today. We'll target devnet 1, and yeah, we'll keep moving things forward. Cool. Let me pull up the agenda then for the next item. Okay, yeah, I had this next just to talk about PeerDOS again, because I figured it might inform the devnet 1 timing. There were some more details came up, like more issues and or details of BPO and also with validator custody around the PeerDOS feature set. As people got into implementation, I wanted to take some time today to resolve those. So with BPO, there was, I think, a question around this PR that would like backport this BPO idea. I believe that's been closed, so I think we're good there. There was also a thread of conversation on Discord around how we want to handle BPO in the context of networking. So there was a proposal to essentially mix in the BPO schedule into the fork digest so that this is legible in the networking layer. And this is good because you don't want to have to like necessarily peer with some other node who might be on a different BPO than you. So it just keeps the networking layer much cleaner. There is then also a question at that point if we should touch the fork version. At that point, it kind of becomes a hard fork. And this is, I think, really the question here is like, how much of a fork is the BPO change? So let's see. I know, Raul, you were here and you were looking into this. I don't know if anyone else would like to speak to this issue.
Yeah, sure. So I can give some extra context here. With regards to the fork version, I think the key question here is, are BPO forks, given that they change consensus rules, should they be treated as protocol forks? That would mean changing the fork version. The reason why I particularly came to the solution was at the ENR level, peers are indicating what the next fork version is, and this enables fork signaling and it enables better peering. So, but they're not indicating what the next fork digest would be. So kind of like the natural solution would be to change the fork version, but then as we kind of like unravel this, there were more and more deeper changes required, specifically to make everything work and line up nicely. We would need to patch the beacon state as well, which like there is, I think, this kind of like a version of the world where that is desirable, because otherwise would end up, I think, creating a secondary path for deploying consensus breaking views with the network without actually representing them as protocol forks. And I don't know what downstream consequences this could have, like potentially in libraries and other in tools and so on. So that's kind of like the top the top node in the decision tree. But then like downstream from that, there were a bunch of other proposals for the signaling. There was a proposal to signal the next fork, the next BPF fork in the status RPC request response in the response. But the issue with that is that you would need to establish a connection with a peer to then learn whether they're going to follow the fork or not. So this is costly. So still, like if we decide to not represent them as fork versions and just keep them at the fork digest level, then what I would recommend is adding fields to the ENR to indicate what the next BPO fork that's going to be followed is. Yeah, that's kind of like the two different potential paths that we can go into, either changing the fork version or the fork digest, mixing it with the BPO, the next BPO schedule entry, together with an enhancement of the ENR.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, my sense here, and I'm very curious to hear client team's take on this, but my sense here is that if we make these deeper changes into like fork version, then yeah, it's essentially very close to a hard fork. And yeah, this could be fine, but it seems a little bit too invasive. Fork digest, I think, makes sense for the pairing argument. And then, yeah, I wonder if there's like some middle ground. I guess you're saying you would, if we went with that approach, we would do that, but then also add something to the ENR, which is not a big thing, but it is still a thing.
Yeah, it would be pretty compact.
Sorry, what was that? You're a little quiet.
Would be pretty compact. At a byte level, it would just be a few bytes. So not a big deal.
Right. Yeah, I'm thinking more just end-to-end implementation and testing that and everything. But yeah, any other client teams have any thoughts on how to handle this?
So in Lighthouse, like yeah, fork version change is like a bigger deal, causes more changes. Fork digest change is more manageable, it's doable.
Yeah, okay. Terrence says same with Prism. And that's my sense as well, is that's probably the right way to handle this, is make the change to the fork digest. So again, it's clear from the networking layer what's going on with all your peers. And yeah, then having the ENR. And maybe Earl, maybe you could just reiterate, like, that just helps you manage this at the discovery layer.
Yeah, exactly. The ENR is necessary to know for two reasons: fork signaling and to discover the right peers that are going to be following the next fork as you, the same next fork as you, so you can continue connected to that when the fork happens.
Right, without having to connect and do the whole handshake and everything.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool. So what I'll do is, it seems like consensus is moving in this direction. So I'll do a second version, a second iteration of this PR and submit it hopefully later today for folks to review. Hopefully that will resolve the contention here.
Okay, great. And this was a PR to the EIP or the consensus specs, or where did this live?
To the EIP. And from there we can take it to the consensus spec.
Okay. Everyone on board with this? Because I think this was the last piece of BPOs. Again, it sounds like we have them already, and like the core functionality seems like it's working, which is really cool. At least we'll know soon enough, and then we'll round this out. Were there any other open questions with BPOs? Okay, cool. Yeah, thanks for making this updates roll, and great. The other thing that I think we should touch on today under PeerDOS is this notion of validator custody. So we had the feature, and just like a quick summary, the idea is you have additional custody requirements dependent on how much stake you have. So say there's so many validators on a node with this much stake. As there's more stake, then you would custody more columns under PeerDOS. This helps with network stability and a bunch of nice things. The complication, I think, as it is right now, is the way the spec is written currently is it's a very dynamic process where you should basically follow every change to, any validators attached. And this is like a dynamic online process. I think there have been some implementation issues here. And in that case, we should decide if we want to do something simpler just to facilitate shipping. With this in particular, you only change the custody set you need to reason about, I believe, every 32 ETH, right? So like per validator. And okay, thanks, Oscar. Okay, we'll circle back to that. But yeah, so the point being is that it would be fairly infrequent changes. And so then there's, I think, a pretty good argument to make that if this is a more static process, it works well enough. Yeah, I guess I'd be curious if anyone has run into implementation issues with the current spec and if they'd like to, essentially propose we go with the simpler option. And yeah, to Andre's comment, it's possible the people who are closest to this are not on the call today. So we can handle it async, but this is definitely something we should sort out in the next week or two. Because it's been this a long running thread. So
I think we've been basically going back and forth on this for months.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not a bad suggestion, Oscar. Just take it to the testing call Monday. Because it looks like we don't have the people here today. Okay. I will try to follow up on this async just so we can get everything organized. And then let's sort this out Monday. Okay, cool. Sorry, I was just checking the agenda. So yeah. Okay. So with that all in place, I did want to check in on devnet 1. I can go grab a link to the specs, but yeah, essentially just wanted to touch base if there was anything we needed to resolve otherwise. It sounds like we've added 7917 to devnet 1, so we can make that update. Let's see, we can iron out these things with BPO, and we'll decide validator custody, but it's also framed as an optional thing. So I think if that doesn't make it until devnet 2, that's acceptable at least. Are there any other things for devnet 1 specs people would like to discuss right now? We feel good about them? Okay. Oscar, do you want to just ask?
I mean, I'm just curious, basically, for just some sentiment check in terms of are we feeling kind of the focus getting nicely towards a conclusion here, or are we secretly worried and we might kind of need some extra time? What's the kind of current state of things?
Yeah, maybe a different way to frame this is once we iron out things with devnet 0, do we feel like devnet 1 will be, at least do we expect devnet 1 to be pretty streamlined on top of that? And then from there, would that put us in a place where we feel PeerDOS is stable? The next big thing after that, once we have something we feel is like a stable implementation of PeerDOS, is then to think about scaling the blob count and ironing that out, which I expect will take over the summer. But yeah, the way I've been thinking about it at least is get stable code, then we essentially move to perf testing around the blob count, and that lines us up for Fusaka. Yeah, Terrence says here after devnet 1, just testing. Okay. Cool. So I think that was all we had for Fusaka. And yeah, thanks everyone. I feel like that was pretty streamlined. I think we're making good progress there. So, okay. The other thing today was Glamsterdam. And yeah, so some of this might be a little different or new, just given this new proposal we have to think around, or how we think about, scheduling hard forks, pacing them, and all of this stuff. So we said we'd move to this sort of regime now, where this call is essentially focused on fork +1. We'd have a lot of the core current fork stuff go to the testing call. So what that means then is we can now open the thread of Glamsterdam, which is the next fork for this call. There's a couple things here, and I mean, yeah, maybe just to get ahead of this, I don't think we should make any decisions today around Glamsterdam, but I did want to start to open the conversation. The framing that Tim had in his proposal, which I thought was pretty nice, is to start by discussing the focus of the fork. So essentially, should Glamsterdam focus on scaling? Should it focus on UX? There's like a number of high-level categories we could frame forks around. For what it's worth, I think most people would say that we should focus on scaling for Glamsterdam. But I did want to leave some room for that conversation, again, just to get things started. After that, there were 2 headliners on the CL side so far that have been proposed for Glamsterdam. I invited the authors of those EIPs to give a short overview today. And again, the point is not to decide anything, but just to start the conversation. And then, yeah, a key bit, I think, given all that context, is for us to start to discuss today what community input do we need? I think this is something that came up with our scoping of Petra, is not being as in sync with the community and how to think about that. And so, yeah, the thinking is essentially to open the conversation today and then highlight different input we feel like we're lacking, and then we can move forward on that for future calls. So with that context, yeah, Ansgar, you have your hand up, so I'll let you speak.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think it obviously makes sense to kind of talk here mostly about the CL side focus, and on ACDE more about the EL side focus. And I think in some ways the CL side is a bit easier. I think kind of across the general priorities that I think right now we seem to want to have, and of course we can discuss those as well. But I think mostly it's around, well, scaling the L1, scaling the blobs, making sure that also UX and things like censorship resistance are in a good place. And so for Glamsterdam, that seems to just very naturally mean we will have to find some ways to continue the blob scaling. That probably will already take up a meaningful portion of the attention on the CL side. There might be some EL side scaling opportunities that will require CL help. So for example, ePBS or some sort of delayed execution, some variants of that would also be CL side. So basically CL might also be able to help with that. One thing that I think explicitly, because I think otherwise priorities don't make sense if you don't say what they do not include. I personally think that on the CL side, we've actually been a bit much on the side of focusing around just like features for the users of the CL. Users of the CL are mostly stakers. I think over the last 2-3 years, we've very much focused on delivering kind of just quality of life, nice to have features there. I would say we should deprioritize that for a while. I think we're in a good place there now after MaxCB. There are some proposals right around like reducing the withdrawal time and whatnot. I think these should very much be in the nice to have category. Like if we end up having room for that in Glamsterdam, great, but I think that should not be front and center. And the last thing I would also say is, because Fossil is already one of the proposed ones, and of course we'll hear arguments for that, I think we all agree Fossil will have to be shipped soon. I would personally say right now, in the moment we're in time, I would prioritize scaling, meaning that there are some arguments that Fossil is also very crucial for scaling because it reduces our reliance on solo building for censorship resistance. And so basically making building a bit more heavy is easier to do after we have Fossil. So in that sense, Fossil is also helping with scaling. But I think we should basically, for the short term, be pragmatic about, does it already constitute a bottleneck that we need to address now? Otherwise, I would personally wait with Fossil for like 1 or 2 more hard forks. But yeah, so that's kind of my general mindset for what Glamsterdam should focus on delivering.
Okay, thanks. Any general comments on focus? Otherwise, I think it might be helpful just to get into these headliner proposals to help ground the conversation. Okay. So then I just went in order of proposal here. So the first one was 7732 ePBS. POTUS, if you'd like to give a short overview and I guess frame it then in the context of scaling UX, these types of fork focuses that I think we want.
Sure. Let me just share the couple of slides that I used for the protocol call. Let me see if I can. I do this? Here it is. All right. This is just a couple of slides. Most people here already know the mechanism, so I'm not going to go over that again. I just want to mention quickly what are the scaling properties of ePBS. It's simple. ePBS gives you the following. It removes all of the broadcast of the payload and the blobs from the hot path. Instead of like having 2 seconds to broadcast the block, the complete block, consensus, execution, and blobs, you will have now between 8 and 11 seconds. And you will have now between 8 and 11 seconds with the current slot times to broadcast blobs, the whole thing. Bottleneck today for scaling blobs and for scaling in general, the bottleneck today is bandwidth. There's no other bottleneck that gets even close to bandwidth. So these numbers are just huge changes. And this is the only EIP that achieves this thing of like completely decoupling the payload from the block and completely decoupling the broadcast of the blobs from the validation of the block. So that's the major change that this EIP gives in terms of scaling. Of course, there are other known scaling benefits which like move around the trust assumptions on off-protocol players, but I've been told not to focus on this today. They are written in this slide. Let me just go to the next one. Another features that ePBS has. It's absolutely trivially composable with other proposals for scaling, both on the EL and on the CL. And it's easy because of the mechanism of separating the consensus from execution logic. Once you have different consensus and execution logic, then you can just tackle both sides independently. So compare what's the complication of including fossil with other proposals for delayed execution. Of course, ePBS gives you delayed execution. And compare it with the proposal on how to include this for ePBS. For ePBS, including fossil is just trivial. It's just a single bit list that needs to go in the bid. Including block access list is absolutely trivial. It doesn't even affect ePBS at all. So there's no changes that are needed whenever you want to make changes either purely on the consensus side or purely on the execution side, because the logic is completely decoupled. So that's what ePBS does. It separates the payload from the block, and it makes it simpler to argue about changes on either side. As it stands today, it only involves CL changes. It does not touch the EL at all. It doesn't even touch the execution engine if you do this correctly, in the sense that when the consensus layer gets the block, it doesn't even talk to the EL to validate it at all. There's no even a single message to the local EL. It can be tested in isolation because of this change, because of this property. So whatever the EL is doing in a fork, we can just test ePBS separated at that time. It's already implemented almost completely. There are some simplifications that aren't included yet, but it's fully implemented in Teku and Prism. And well, that's it. Let me just have this last slide with some questions that people typically complain about. There are many others, but these three I like. This is one that I get very common. It enshrines a particular type of auction, and it would just like give us this tech debt forever. No, there's no auction in ePBS, not at all. The proposer can do whatever he wants. 99% of the EIP is separating the block from the payload. The auction part, it doesn't exist. what happens is that the payload has to be signed by someone. That's just for simplicity, and that can be changed at any time in the future. In fact, all of the proposals that we have for APS, execution tickets, and so forth rely on this separation of the payload from the block. So they rely already on the feature that ePBS produces minimally. It is not compatible with existing off-protocol mechanism. That's just purely false. ePBS is compatible with anything that it happens now because you can continue doing whatever you're doing now if you wish to. ePBS just allows you to do in a different way, but you can just still sign your blocks and your payload yourself and trust whomever external builder is going to produce you a payload if you just signed it blindly. It increases protocol complexity. No, I think I already argued that it doesn't. It's true that it's not a simple EIP to implement. It takes time to implement on the consensus side, but it actually simplifies the protocol itself. It simplifies it because it separates the concerns of the consensus and the execution. If you want to read more, these are resources. The first two are just non-technical, exactly in the same tense that I talked today. And the last one has more than what you wish to look for on the technical side.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for the overview. So yeah, I think in summary, like if the framing of Glamsterdam in terms of fork focus is scaling, yeah, the argument here is like ePBS gives us these pipelining benefits that directly helps us scale. I don't know if there are other questions from that. I did have one question. I believe given the way we separate the execution payload from the consensus block, there is some impact on how transaction inclusion latency would be perceived, effectively adding a delay. Could you speak to that a little bit?
The delay of including execution, including transactions.
Right.
Yes, so this is definitely an issue. The issue here is the following: is if you're sending a transaction today, the builder can can include it right at the moment that you're sending it. With the ePBS, there is a delay between what the proposer has committed to a block, and that block is not revealed yet. However, this delay, we're looking into like making the slot shorter, and we believe that we can push this delay to about like 1 second, 1.5 seconds. We have been doing experiments with 6 megabytes blocks, and they show that we can actually squeeze the time in which the builder has to reveal their payload.
Okay, thank you.
Patty has a question about fork choice. I don't know if you want me to mention. There is,
willing. Yeah.
There is, and this is something that people typically ask about, and it's scary because, frankly, because most people don't know what fork choice is on Ethereum. And there are few that actually do know, and they have this concern, and I agree. Any touch on fork choice is important, but most of our bugs have not been on fork choice. Most of the bugs that we have seen and the important security concerns that we've had been around the execution engine and actually the non-separation of the consensus and the execution. However, there is a minimal change to fork choice. The change to fork choice is that now, today you have a node in fork choice means that you've seen a block, a consensus block, and an execution block. And with ePBS, a node in fork choice would mean 3 different things. Either you've seen the consensus and the execution block, or you've seen only the consensus block, or you haven't seen anything. So there's this one new feature that you need to account for, that a consensus block might have come without a payload that was revealed, but that's the only change. We still rely on proposer boost in the same way as today to enforce the security of the builder and of the proposer. And there's a little mechanism of merge view that I don't want to get into details today, but that's just very minor, which is just counting attestations from the PTC.
Right. And just to clarify, there would be then like 2 proposer boosts, because you'd have one for the first round and then
no, there's only one. There's no changes to fork choice today except the node mechanism that I said. So there's only one proposer boost that enforces that the consensus block was there, and the builder can actually overload the existence of that boost to not produce his own block, his own payload. There's no changes to fork choice except this fact that attestations that attested for a block that did not support a payload then don't count for the full node that has the consensus block and the payload in it.
Got it. Okay. And yeah, in terms of process, I will elevate this comment from Ansgar that essentially, I think now the framing is to just have an intro to these different proposals. We will get, I think, much deeper into the weeds later on in the process. So we'd probably then at that point want to get deeply into like pros and cons and start, weighing different EIPs against each other. Today, I just wanted to open the conversation. So yeah, let's just keep that in mind. You did mention POTUS. There were 2 CL clients who have implemented it. I would assume Prism, and what was the other one?
Teku. We
Okay,
had
okay.
finalizing, and that accelerated the process quite a bit. Once you have more than one client, it's very simple to start testing.
Okay, cool. Yeah, thanks for the overview. Unless there are other questions for that, I think we'll then turn to the next proposal we have on the CL side, which is Fossil. Let's see, is Thomas on the call?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Yeah, take it away.
Thank you. Can you guys see the presentation?
Yep.
Nice. Yeah, hi everyone. So yeah, I'm Thomas. I'm a researcher at DF, and I'm actually very happy to make the case for Fossil. So it's EIP 7805 as a headliner for Glamsterdam. So yeah, I thought I would just start by the explain like I'm 5 sort of prompt. What Fossil does is basically improving Ethereum's censorship resistance. And it does so by enabling multiple validators to ensure that any transaction valid according to the protocol rules is included in Ethereum blocks. So it does this by having multiple validators that build inclusion lists and impose constraints on the sophisticated builders that we have today. I am going to go through the mechanism real fast, just in case. There are like 3 very simple steps that are important to keep in mind. The first step is about building and broadcasting the inclusion lists. So each slot you have 16 validators that are randomly selected to become IL committee members or includers. And each of them basically monitors the mempool and includes like transactions that are pending in the public mempool in their inclusion lists up to 8 kilobytes, which is like around 40 transactions per inclusion list if you take the median transaction size. And then they broadcast their inclusion list over the CLP2P network. And what validators do is they monitor the P2P network and they store the inclusion lists that are broadcast until a deadline. That's the view freeze deadline. And that's 9 seconds into the slot. And so at this point, they keep forwarding like inclusion lists, but they stop storing new ones. Then the second step that's very important is about the builder, that is including inclusion list transactions in its block. And so what the builder does is it also collects and stores the inclusion lists, but it actually has additional time after the view freeze deadline, just to make sure like there is enough time for the builder to see all the available inclusion lists that were broadcast by the committee members. And so 11 seconds into the slot, the builder just like takes the union of transactions across all its stored inclusion lists and then include them in the execution payload before the full block is just like proposed to the rest of the network by the proposer. And in the last step, that's like the enforcement step, attesters also take the union of transactions from inclusion list they stored according to like their local view until the view freeze deadline. And they check whether all these transactions were actually included in the block's execution payload by the bidder. This is where the fork choice enforced comes from. It's like attesters will basically only vote for the block if it satisfies inclusion list conditions according to their local view. So that's the mechanism. I want to briefly talk about some fossil properties. The first one is that inclusion list and the payload can be built in parallel, like during the same slot, which is sort of nice. And they only need to be merged towards the end of the slot. And that provides real-time censorship resistance, which is one thing we like. The second part is like we actually have multiple inclusion list proposals, like that's a very core and central design consideration. And that allows to be quite robust to commitment attacks, but it also gets us like a very nice 1 out of n honesty assumption. And what it means is like we only need one IL committee member to build its inclusion list honestly and include transactions from the mempool without censoring for the whole mechanism to work properly. Then the conditional property means that the bidder must include all the IL transactions until the block is unless the block is full, sorry. And the builder is also not constrained on where inclusion list transactions are included in the block or their order. And these two like last properties are like quite important just to like prevent inclusion lists from being crowded out by MEV transactions. Like imagine if there is like dedicated additional block space that is for IL transactions, and that will have to be included, like, I don't know, at the top of the block or at the end of the block. We will probably see like something like an IL boost sort of thing emerge, where like you try to sort of like include your valuable transactions, but using IL block space. And so in Fossil right now, we avoid this because the inclusion list transactions have no ordering guarantees. They must be created before the builder actually builds the block. They are broadcast publicly. So there is really no point in trying to include your MEV transactions via Fossil. Why it matters? Well, I think it's kind of obvious, but like censorship resistance is sort of like a core Ethereum value. And today we have more than 80% of all blocks that are produced by like just 2 builders. And yeah, it's important to keep in mind that these 2 builders can arbitrarily decide whether to include or exclude transactions from like most of Ethereum blocks. And just by looking at the data, you can see like these huge fluctuations in builder censorship. And that's just caused by like 1 or 2 builders that just suddenly decided to censor more or less based on like the, I don't know, the fluctuations of their policies. So what Fossil does is like it actually fixes this by giving power sort of like back to the more decentralized set of validators to enforce inclusion constraints on builders basically, and that restores fairness and ensures Ethereum remain incredibly neutral. Who it benefits? Well, I think it's sort of like clear that it benefits like all users by ensuring like their transactions are just included on chain in a timely manner, as long as the network is not congested, and without having to rely on like those 2 centralized entities to not censor them. So I think it's like a big UX thing. And the primary benefits, I think the first one is obvious. The second one is actually sort of very interesting because it allows to scale Ethereum without having to impose the constraints on the local block builders. The idea there is like if you allow validators with Fossil to independently enforce transaction inclusion, then it's a major step towards scaling Ethereum throughput because it removes the dependency you have on local builders to preserve censorship resistance at the cost of performance and incentive. And I linked it there, but there is a really good article by Barnaby that goes into more details on this. The third is like the improved UX that I talked about. I think when your transaction is censored today, you have to wait for quite a long time, like 7 to 8 blocks, I think. And in Fossil, that actually drastically reduces the time to inclusion for transactions that might be censored. So it is a UX improvement. Yeah, so I think it does like fit quite well with the Ethereum priorities in terms of, I mean, it both allows scaling and it improves UX. So, but that's my perspective. I'm obviously a bit biased. It doesn't scale blobs, so it doesn't like do 3 out of 3, but 2 is quite good. And a secondary benefit that was also brought to me recently, and it's kind of anecdotal, but it's nice. Like it might actually allow some optimistic rollups to shorten the challenge period from 7 days to 2-3 days, if their TBS is not too big, but like it's still like an interesting benefit, I guess. Yeah, I'll just go on why now. I think, yeah, we've been talking about having ILs and like better solutions for censorship resistance for a while. The builder market is inherently centralized just because of like the MEV and the private order flow dynamics. So I don't think that will change like anytime soon. And on the contrary, basically we've observed like increasing vertical integration across builders and relays and searchers over time. So it's not like looking like it's going into in a super nice direction, to be honest. I think observing how Fossil behaves on mainnet is actually also important to allow us to make decisions on future protocol changes we might want to make. For example, like this new idea of like delayed execution with DKVMs. I forgot the link, but I will put it to it. Is like depending on like the same view merge mechanism we use for Fossil. So it would be nice to see it live on mainnet, and that will inform us on how to deal with other proposals that are important for future upgrades. We need also Fossil to ship APS, in my opinion. And then a very important for why now, I think it's just always like understated, but like we are like quite lucky that there is not that much censorship going on the network right now at the protocol level. And if we wait and things change, and they can, like it could actually make protocol level changes to improve censorship resistance a lot more difficult to coordinate and adopt. And I think that's a point that needs to be taken into consideration in like the sort of urgency in shipping Fossil. And then I'll just finish by the technical readiness. Yeah, so Fossil, first of all, is like the result of like multiple years of research on inclusion lists, multiple proposals, view merge mechanism, and so on. It's now working and like implemented on different clients. 5 clients have worked on it, and it actually successfully runs on a local devnet with Prism, Lodestar, Teku, and Geth interoperability. We are now working on the spec test for both the CL and the EL. We've had 11 Fossil breakout sessions that have been like, at least for me, like very, very nice and useful. And we addressed like sort of like security concerns around IL equivocation and stuff that was actually a problem in like a previous EIP that was about inclusion lists. We've made sure it's also compatible with account abstraction, delayed execution, ePBS, blocks, block level access lists, and other like proposals on the EL and CL side. And you can go on meetfossil.eth.limo. It's a censorship resistance website that's using ENS and IPFS. And there you can find like an actual update on progress on the implementation side of things, but also like all the resources that are like useful for Fossil, both for like the current proposal, but also like research directions and everything. Thanks. That's it for me. Thanks. Yeah, thanks a lot to all the co-authors, but also like all the client devs and contributors that have worked on this so far. It's been super nice to work with all of you. And that's it for me.
Great. Thanks for the overview. Yeah, so, going with this focus or this framing of the focus of Glamsterdam as some combination of scaling and UX, then yeah, we have Fossil that fits into that category. So, okay. Any questions, I guess, to close out the segment on Fossil? Oscar, I think your hand was up for a split second. I don't know if that
Well,
was.
just for comment, I just wanted to say that like in a way it's almost like we should also not over focus on these focus areas, right? Like I think the reason, like I think some people in chat were a bit amused to be that basically like Fossil is now being presented as a UX and a scaling benefit. I think it is both, but it is much more crucially also delivering one of Ethereum's core values. And I think it's much more justified through that. Like censorship resistance is at the very core of what Ethereum is all about. And one of the core things it also delivers for L2s and for everything, right? And I think it doesn't need justification through these shorter term focus areas. I think the main reason why it is useful to have that conversation, how much does it also help with UX, how much does it also help with scaling, is to ask the question, do we need to have that in the next fork, or is it more something that we need to like slot in at the next convenient time? So I still think that conversation we should have once we kind of actually determine the scope of Glamsterdam in a month or so. But I just wanted to mention, right, just like this is crucial to the future of Ethereum, definitely. I think we all agree on that.
Right. Yeah. And, it's, I think, perfectly fine to say that CR is a focus of a fork, at least as a general statement. So we don't need to like rigidly stick to just scaling or just UX as like these only options for the Glamsterdam focus. Yeah, Tamal.
Yeah. I just want to agree fully. Like I don't want to like make it seem like it's as important for like scaling and UX or like just like going through these lenses as it is for censorship resistance. It's mostly definitely like a proposal for censorship resistance. I think it's like also interesting because it can lead to these like pretty big improvements in my opinion in the future and like in scaling, which is interesting to think about. But yeah, I didn't mean to like sell it as like a scaling EIP. I don't think I want to do that, and I don't think it's fair. It's like it is a censorship resistance EIP, and the argument, I think the more convincing argument for me of why it should be included rather like sooner than later is more about like we don't know how censorship is going to evolve on the network, and that's the part that worries me the most. Not like, oh, we need to get Fossil in because it's going to unlock like a ton of scaling. That's not where the urgency is, at least for me personally.
Makes sense. Thanks. Okay. Then I think the other thing for today, I did want to try to start building the muscle memory of thinking about getting input from different parts of the community. So yeah, I assume this is a conversation that will probably also be informed by the execution layer, but assuming then we have this focus on scaling, possibly UX, maybe CR for Glamsterdam, then yeah, I think either of these headliners could make sense in that framing. One thing that we've historically, I think, lacked quite a bit is, again, input from the broader community. So I wanted to take some time to discuss and to make it concrete. We can focus on these two EIPs today, and just start to highlight who we'd want to get input from to help inform the scoping discussion. So off the top of my head right now, I think we could pretty easily say that with ePBS, there are a number of comments here that were speaking to different people in the MEV ecosystem. So I think we should try to incorporate their input. And then yeah, Fossil, it's kind of a pretty broad set simply just because it's all users of Ethereum. But yeah, we mentioned rollups, and yeah, I think there are a number of people we could incorporate there. And let's see, I was just looking at Tim's comment here. I think we should assume there will be more, I don't know.
More candidates, CL headliners. Like we should assume. Yeah, Barnabas was asking the question.
Okay, right. So yeah, this is, again, I just wanted to start the conversation today. I assume there'll be more, and we'll cover them in future calls. But yeah, okay, Nixo has a nice call out here to solo stakers for ePBS.
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
Yeah. So like as we are implementing, thinking about implementing ePBS for the Ethereum CL. So if we think at the privacy level, and because the future roadmap of Ethereum is going to be the privacy level, So what are the impacts it can to the core protocol? Have any idea about it?
The question was core impacts or impact to the core protocol from ePBS.
No, question was that ePBS is just like another way of the censorship resistance as compared to other mechanism. So my question is that like if we encrypt the for example we are encrypting the blocks and transaction end to end.
I can
So
probably
what?
take. I'm not. I can probably take this. Justin here might be probably a better person, but I think that all of these primitives for encrypted mempools already rely on some sort of separation, on some sort of delayed execution. And ePBS gives you this. So it's tangential, but I think all of the private mempool mechanisms get only stronger when you have delayed execution.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Ansgar has an interesting take here that essentially this drive for community input should be more of an EL focus than a CL focus. I think we can debate that. I don't know if you had something to add to that, Ansgar.
No, I mean, of course, also we should try it everywhere. I'm just saying, I think it's more important on the EL side, or more of a liking thing on the EL side.
Gotcha. Oh yeah, POTUS.
I think we have this idea that scaling the EL means scaling the protocol, and then this separation of the EL and the CL. But we see that one of our biggest bottleneck is networking, and scaling the CL does affect this. So it's very hard to separate this, and we can actually talk about scaling EIPs on the CL call.
Yeah, and I guess the general comment there is as we get closer to a final Glamsterdam scope, I think we will need to take these things together. We can't just say, oh, the CL's over here, the EL's over there, and they just are working off in a vacuum, especially given the nature of, I think all of these EIPs we've discussed today have at least some impact on both layers. So we will eventually need to take them in consideration at the same time.
Stocks, I have one request to you. I already mailed to Tim also and you about I recently joined the core protocol meetings because I was working on layer 2 protocol, so our paper is coming very soon. So I have one request where the meetings of the all rank is fine because I also discovered the project management repo, but I did not find. Then I lately find in the Discord, so there is so many channels for it. So could you please approve I got the meeting link in my calendar?
Yeah, I couldn't quite hear you. I think you're asking where you could find information about the ACD meetings.
Yeah, actually, I mail regarding it. As I read the repo, I have to mail either the Tim or you stop about to join the meeting. But actually, I did not find any meeting link there. It only showing there is the meeting in the calendar, but there is no any meeting link. But fortunately, I find through the Discord. But many of the time I forgot to join because there is the meeting link is not present in the my Google Calendar. So could you share the calendar or provide me permission to join that?
Yeah, well, it sounds like you've discovered the process. So yeah, we have agendas in the PM repo that you mentioned, and then also, the meeting information shared on Discord. So yeah, my email is in the agenda. So if you would like to follow up, let's just take this offline. Oh yeah, Mingfei.
Is there some time left for me to present my EIP, like 12 minutes? So I want to make it in the headline in the next hard fork.
Yeah, so I replied on the agenda about this. The way we're thinking about this now is having this process for headliner proposals. So I think ideally you would have a post on ETH Magicians that proposes the headliner, if that fits the scope, and then we could cover in a future call.
Okay, that's cool.
Okay, thanks. Okay, let's get back on topic. So I did want to highlight different parts of the community that I think we should try to get input from as we inform the Glamsterdam scope discussion. And let's see, so we have different MEV ecosystem people for ePBS, solo stakers there, probably generally validators across the board. And yeah, anything anyone wants to call out for fossil? I think that would generally just be everyone. So that might be a harder set to get a concrete representation of. Okay. Yeah, I'll think about how we can get, again, concrete input from these different parties and incorporate them into future calls as we continue the Glamsterdam scoping conversation. And with that, let me just double check. Oh, there was a, okay, I guess I'll just call this out. There's a poll here for the H-star name for the upgrade after Glamsterdam. Let me just grab a link here. There's this post on ETH Magicians. So yeah, if you would like to chime in, you can do so there. And okay. Yeah, I mean, I see your comments here. I'll follow up with you after this. But yeah, otherwise, I think that was essentially everything on the agenda today. And yeah, unless there are any other comments, then I will go ahead and say we can wrap up early. Yeah, I guess generally just, yeah, be thinking about the different points made today around Glamsterdam, continue thinking about the framing of the fork and like what are the sort of core properties we want to focus on. And yeah, I think, well, maybe I won't speak to next week, but yeah, point being is we will continue the conversation and yeah, get to a Glamsterdam. Okay, unless there's anything else, let's go ahead and wrap up today.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.